a great problem. Live, okay.
If YouTube and Facebook say we're live, then we're live. L'chaim, everyone.
L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim l'bracha. We have some l'chaim, everyone. Yaakov Yisrael, you can give him a l'chaim.
Yeah, you always give l'chaim a message, you know?
L'chaim.
Some more of these.
I need to get myself a little Rebbe's table over here. From? I start from the Rebbe since I'm bringing a Rebbe's tish. Do. The klein shikazans.
Something is mine.
I think we have that.
Oh, not now. I'm saying in the future.
Oh.
In the future.
How do I close up?
Here we are. You, l'chaim l'bracha. L'chaim l'bracha.
On your page. Where do I go?
It should be on. Are you on Facebook?
Oh, it's on
Live.
Facebook.
And on YouTube.
Right here?
That's it. See?
Ah, there
You're
we go.
there.
Hey.
Not only is it on, but you're there.
Yeah.
L'chaim l'bracha, everyone. Chatzah, De'yuri. Adonai Melech Ha'olam, Sha'akim Le'bedvarek.
Mine.
Chaim. Yeah. Have some of that. That's Malava Malka.
How do I share this?
The powerful Malava Malka. Special Malava Malka. Motzei Shabbos Parshas Kodesh. Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Lech Lecha. Why is it on? Who am I hearing? No. Shut that.
Okay.
Thank you. L'chaim. So Rabbi Yisrael is here already. Once Rabbi Yisrael is here, it's probably a sign that Rabbi Yisrael, the Kozhnitzer Magid, also was here. Because both of you are both named after the same Yisrael. So there must be a very deep connection. I have to say that today, when I announced in Shul that there's going to be a Malava Malka and the Kozhnitzer Magid is coming and the Ganze Meise, 2 people came over to me afterwards and asked me if he's going to speak in Yiddish or in English. Two people asked me the same question. So I said, he was around 200 years ago, but I'm sure he's going to be here tonight too. And whatever he's going to speak, we'll wait and we'll see. So it's exciting when you do a Malava Malka and you do a special event for a tzaddik. The tzaddik joined. Even Yehuda Green made a song. If the Hasidim and the Rebbe do, right? So when we try to connect to a great tzaddik. Now, in the past, let me move it up a little bit. In the past, whenever we've done any Malava Malka, we always try to do it in the month of the yard site of the tzaddik. The Kozhnitzer Magid's yard site is in Tishrei. Yud Dalid Tishrei. That's Erev Sukkot is the Kozhnitzer Magid's yard site. So generally in the month of Tishrei, it doesn't work out for us to do Malava Malkus. So it always bothered me because the top, you know, if you want to select the top 5 of the Chassidish Rebbe's, it's the most tempting to do the Kozhnitzer Magid because something very deep inside of me that has a deep love for the Kozhnitzer Magid. It's just on a different scale. And so we're still within the Shloshim, as today is the night of Yud Aleph. So in 3 days, we're in the 3 days of the completion of 30 days of his yard site. Since it's Parshas Lech Lecha, so here's a magnificent story. In order for me to get the right name, Reb Gedalia, he was later a student of the Kozhnitzer. He was a Talmud of the Kozhnitzer Magid. Hold on. Later became a big Rebbe. His name, hold on one second. Rebbe Gedalia of Zelachov. Rebbe Gedalia of Zelachov was a moil. And one time he was called to a village, to a place, to do a bris milah. And he went to that place, and there was a woman there. Obviously, she had a baby. And when he arrived and he was, wanted to do the bris, he found himself in trouble. What happened? Because this was in wartime. It could be this was during the Napoleon War. The Kozhnitzer Magid passed away in Tov Kuf Ayin Hey. That is 1815. Actually, at the time was probably 1814 because it's still the secular date doesn't turn over yet. So it's 1814. He passed away 2 years after the Alter Rebbe. 7 years older. Doesn't speak about his birth, but so this could have been at the end of his life during the war, Napoleon War. And this Rebbe Gedalia of Zelachov was a moil. Later, this Rebbe Gedalia of Zelachov became a Rebbe in Poland. He came to this woman, and this woman told him that that there's no one home. There's literally no one there. She was the only lady living in town. What happened to her husband? Her husband and the other, maybe there's other few people that maybe from you didn't, but all the men left. Why? Because either they were afraid they would be drafted. It was a whole situation that they escaped. So literally no one was there. So he had no one to be there to help him with the bris. He didn't know what to do. How is he going to be both the moil and the sandik at the same time? So he was at a loss. So he went outside, just like sometimes you go outside, look for a minion. He went outside and he's trying to catch someone, a yid. And he's getting very frustrated because he schlepped out here trying to do this bris, and there's no one in sight, not one Jew in sight, waiting and waiting and waiting. The time is moving and he has to do it. He has to get back, and maybe he has to catch it during the day. There's no one to get, and he's mamish beside himself already. He's getting very, very, very lost. Like, what is he doing? Suddenly, at a distance, he sees a Sayyid, a shoemaker, going. The guy has a stool with which the shoemakers would sit on when they would make their shoes. So he goes and he meets this fellow, and he asked him, please. He said, Abiyad, and I need help, a sandik, someone should come. I'm a moil, there's a bris. So he came. He came and he sat down on the stool that he had with him, and he held the baby, and they did the whole bris. And afterwards, this person, Tesand, pulls out a little fleshel of wine, and they fill up the cup, and he makes the brachas, and not the shoemaker, the moil makes the brachas, and they give him a name, and zeh, and then the bris is over, and then very quickly this guy disappeared before he can. He was out the door. So he says, "Where is he?" He starts running after him. He wants to say thank you, this, that, nowhere to be seen. Everywhere he's running, screaming, "Where the yid, we missed the garnish." So he's thinking to himself, Eliyahu Malach HaBris, the bris milah, probably was Eliyahu Hanavi. He's all excited, he got to see Eliyahu Bagashmi's mamish, and he came and he did the bris. So he went. He was a chassid of the Kozhnitzer Magid. So he went to the Kozhnitzer Magid, and to kind of relate the story as he walked in the Kozhnitzer Magid. I think the story is that even before he said anything, the Kozhnitzer Magid said, "You're all excited that you met, and do means that you met Eliyahu Hanavi, but that's not who you met. Who it really was. If you would know that this was Avram Avinu, you would be even more excited." And this is what it was. It was Avram Avinu who came to the bris. In any case, the holiness. This is connected to what we left off today in the morning. Today in the morning, we left off with Avram Avinu's bris milah, how Avram made the bris. So here, Avram Avinu, when we need a bris, and we really, really need him, Avram comes around. And you just have to have the Kozhnitzer Magid's eyes to see when Avram Avinu was at the bris. You never know how many other brisin and where he is and what that happens, but the Kozhnitzer Magid can see. In the Haftarah that we read today, We read a pasuk in today's Haftarah. The koivei havaya yachlifu koyach. The koivei Hashem. Those who hope to Hashem, yachlifu koyach, exchange energy. Yachlifu koyach, simply it means that they get renewed energy. The Kozhnitzer Magid was a very, very weak person. The doctors had no idea how this human being can live. When he was born, as we'll soon see the story, his father was a very old man already. He was born and therefore, maybe that was the reason, is he was very schwach. Very schwach. He was tiny, he was small. He hardly had any flesh on him. His body was even as a little kid. Ad kedei kach, that in his later years of his life, he was in bed most of the day. He was mamish in bed. He was a goyim tzaddik nizgov ein komoyu. But yet, magic would happen. Unbelievable. They had to bring him to shul on a bed or on a chair. They would carry the chair, and that's how they would bring him to shul, because he had no koyach even to move. He couldn't move. He was in bed. I'm talking about the later years of his life. Yet, when he would come into shul, his koyachis were like unbelievable. His davening, suddenly he would spring up to life like a little child. Like a little child. I think it was one of the Stolen Rebbes, one of the Kalina Rebbes, that said to the anacle of the Kozhnitzer Magid. I think it was one of his daughters were marrying into the Kozhnitzer this. She said, your Zayder was so weak that you had to come. They were able to bring him with a chair to the shul, carrying. But when he came to Shirul Hashem Shir Chadash, to sing to the Eibishter Shir Chadash, he would dance like a little child. He would suddenly it was unbelievable. One time, the Kozhnitzer Magid was going to a bris, and they were trying to help him on. Some people reached out with assistance to get him onto the wagon. So he looked at them and he said, Ich darf hilf. I need your help. It says, V'koy Hashem yachlifu koyach. Mir beiten mit dem Kiviyachol dem koyach. Mir beiten mit dem Kiviyachol dem koyach. Und hat genug koyach. In English, he said, you think I need your help? Koy Hashem yachlifu koyach. Those who hope in the Eibishter, yachlifu, they switch koyach. Mir beiten, we exchange mit dem Kaviyachol, with the Eibishter koyach. In other words, we switch. And the Eibishter charges, we charge with the Eibishter's battery. And the Eibishter has boundless koyach. With that, he jumped right onto the wagon because he's going to a mitzvah. He was going to by him, you can literally see that his chayos of his guv gashmi was pashat elukus, was pashat getlichkeit. There was he couldn't wear shoes. He was so weak, he couldn't catch. He had slippers. All he had was slippers. Under his feet, they would put a mat made out of bear hide, so it shouldn't be hard. He should be able to stand. And this is how he stood. When it came to davening and when it came to this, but his guf was so mezuchach, his guf was so holy, that the holy Ruzhiner said about the Kozhnitzer Magid, that his guf has the behidus, has the illumination, the edelkeit, the shining, his guf of 1,000 neshamas. The guf of the Kozhnitzer Magid has a behidus, has a purity of 1,000 neshamas. That's his guf. Now, where did he get such a guf and such a neshama? Can you imagine his neshama? So we go back to the Kozhnitzer Magid's birth. So there's many Hasidic stories relating to the Kozhnitzer Magid being born. He was born in the year Tov Tzadik Zayin, which is 1737. So as I mentioned earlier, that's 7 years before the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is built in Tov Kuf Hey. He was born in Tov Tzadik Zayin, in the city of Apt. Apt is a city in Poland. And the story that is told about his birth is as follows. His father's name was Reb Shapsi. His mother's name was Pedal. They were a couple that lived many, many years, and they didn't have any children. In their older age, Reb Shapsi was a bookbinder. And in his work of doing books, so that's how he somehow, etched out a living. He wasn't a wealthy fellow. He was a pretty poor all his life. But he made enough for him and his wife to live. He didn't need more. The Reb Shapsi wasn't a regular bookbinder. He was a Yish Yirei Alekim Shemayim, and he was a Tmimish Yid, a beautiful Yid. It says about, they say about him, and when he was binding the books, he never wanted to use like a hammer. And they used to bind it sometimes with wooden things. They didn't have such paper and stuff. They used to use sometimes wood tops and bottoms and something like this, and used to use a hammer. But he never wanted to lift a hammer on a sefer. So he would take his head and he would bang with his head on the sefer because he didn't want to use a thing. Another thing, he never bound two books together, meaning two at the same time, because he didn't want to ever put one sefer on top of the other because he didn't know who goes on top of who, and he didn't want to decide it. You can see the pashtus, a tzaddik of the Yid, he had such a derech eretz with the svarim that he never wanted to touch. Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, before I get to the Shapsi story, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev asked the Kozhnitzer Magid. They were very, very close to each other. Really, the Kozhnitzer Magid was a particular student by Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, but he was very. Rebbe Levi Yitzchak asked him, "What were your parents zoche to have a neshama like you? How did they bring a neshama like you into the world?" So the Kozhnitzer Magid started saying different things about his father and his parents, and the Derushin said, and the Berditchev said, because of this, you're not zoche for such a holy neshama. And then he said something else, and he said, because of this, you're not zoche for such a holy neshama. And he tried a few things, and finally he told him this story. He said that there was one Yom Kippur in Apt. There was a certain tailor who was not the biggest tzaddik, and he was very close with because he used to tailor. So he used to tailor for the various different pritzim and so on, all the people that called the shots in the towns, the rich noblemen. And such he felt he was a chazan. And such this guy, he got the scent of the idea that he wants to be the chazan for Kol Nidrei. He wants to do Kol Nidrei. And of course, the city didn't want him to do Kol Nidrei. But because he had the backing of these guys, and they sent out a thing that you better let him do Kol Nidrei, he asked them for protection, kind of. And they sent out a thing that they should let this fellow do Kol Nidrei. So he started his chazonis. It's like a chazan over there. He was chazaning and chazaning. And the people in the city, in town, were so upset, they decided beforehand that they're not going along with it. They have no choice. He's doing Kol Nidrei, Kol Nidrei. So they took the machzorim. They all had the machzorim. And they decided that they're going to mamish bang Haman. Like you bang Haman, but they're doing it with the machzorim bang. And they had like wooden bottoms, and they were clapping and zetzing. There was such a tumult, no one can hear him. As soon as he started, the whole place was like rash. It was crazy. And all the machzorim got ripped. So after the davening, the people went over to the Shapsi, and they said to him, "Oh, du hast doch schon ausgebeten na gut Jahr. You have already davened sich for a good year, because everybody's going to bring all the machzorim need now repair." The Shapsi, who Yom Kippur, he came to shul, and he was such a tmimish yid, and he had such a this, that he got so into the Kol Nidrei right away. As soon as he started davening, he was weeping and crying, and he had no idea what they're talking about, because he didn't hear garnish the whole ruckus in the shul. Literally, it was like the roof was coming down. He had no clue what he's talking about, and he thought, and he said, yeah. They meant that he's going to have parnasa b'archava that year. He said, "Oi, matzchois gebeten. I have Baruch Hashem ois gebeten a child." But this is a story told in many places about, and this is what he told the Berditchev. And when the Berditchev heard this, the Berditchev says, so it's a daven in Yom Kippur that you don't even hear anything going on. No, it's a heilig neshama. You can get a heilig neshama. But the story is like this, really, with this Reb Shapsi. Again, this is the Hasidic legend that is told about Dafka, about the birth of the Kozhnitzer Magid. And that is that this Reb Shapsi used to make a living from the bookbinding. But as he was getting older, he was having, after he didn't have koiches anymore. And he wasn't able to work so many hours. He worked much less, and so on and so forth. And as a result of that, the parnasa was dwindling. And to the point that it came one Erev Shabbos, and they literally did not have a penny in the house for them to make Shabbos. Nothing. There wasn't literally a ruble. They couldn't do anything. So his minig was that every Erev Shabbos, B'Shah Asirus. So this must be maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever, when a Shah Asirus. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He would always drop all the work and he would go to shul. That's when he would stop anything and he would go to shul and he would wait there, say Shir Hashirim and all preparation for Shabbos. This time, because there wasn't $1 in the house, and he knew that night it's going to be empty and there's not going to be any food in the house. So it bothered him, but on the other hand, he chas v'shalom didn't want to have to come on to people. That he b'shum oifen didn't want to have. He didn't want to ask favors for anybody. And he was steadfast in this idea that he's not going to ask anybody for help. So he figured, okay, if this is the way the Eibishter wants him to serve him, with an empty Shabbos, an empty Shabbos. He was afraid, however, that his wife would go out and ask the neighbor, a challah, something, a candle, even candles, they didn't have nothing. His wife would go out and ask the neighbors. So he told his wife before he went to shul, please, I don't want you to ask of anybody. We're going to do Shabbos like this. He even told his wife like this, when I'm going to go home from shul, I'm not going to go home. Usually I walk home with people. I'm not going to go home because if I walk home with people, they're going to walk me to the house. They're going to see it's dark. They're going to want to help me. So I'm going to stay later. He gave her an extra warning that he is going to stay, that he is going to stay longer in shul that Shabbos. And the reason is so that no one should know. But he was so, he begged her. And at kedei kach that she gave him a handshake. He didn't settle until she told him she's not asking for anybody. And that was good enough for him. He comes to shul, he davens, he stays late. He comes back and he comes close to his house. Again, he left already Friday, 3 o'clock. I used to go always. Comes to his house, insis lichtig, and he schmecks chalas, and this. And I can't believe it. What's going on in his house? How in the world? He left at 3 in the Shabbat Friday afternoon. There wasn't a penny in the house. No flour, nothing for challah, nothing for this. And suddenly, there is such a suddenly there is such a thing. It shocked him. It was mamish for him, such a shock. He had no idea. So it bothered him. He thought to himself that probably his wife, his Rebbetzin, couldn't hold herself, couldn't contain, she didn't withstand an Nisayan. And she went to ask for the neighbors that the neighbors should give her something. So it bothered him. So he went and he goes to the but he figured, he's not going to say anything. Shabbos, his wife, he's not gonna make a machlokes, a fight, even though it bothered him very much. He made kiddush and he washed and he's in the chalas and he's a big candle. And suddenly he says after the thing, he says, no. So it looks like it was difficult. That's all he said, something like that. So it looks like it was too hard for you. So she said, my dear husband, no, I want you to believe me. I didn't go to anybody. It's not what happened. When you left, and I had to prepare for Shabbos, and there was nothing to prepare. So I figured I'm going to do a cleaning at least let the house be spotlessly clean. So I went and I did like a bedikas chametz. I cleaning out everything. The house should be as clean, never be as clean as this. So she cleaned in all the chudim Tzadikim. And she said, remember, I had a sweater that had buttons, gold, silver buttons. They used to make sometimes, they used to give gifts or something. They used to have garments that had nice buttons. Remember, we lost it a while ago. So I turned up this sweater with the buttons. So immediately I ran to whatever. I gave him the buttons. I cashed in the buttons. I got a couple of rubles. I got money for this. And here we are for Shabbos. No, the Shabbos, he heard this. He got so excited. He became so happy. And he jumped up and he took his wife and he started dancing with her. Him and her are dancing, and he's dancing and dancing and that. The Eibishter gave him such a thing that he's able to have Shabbos. And the Eibishter Mama sent him Shabbos without him having to do anything. And he danced and he danced and he danced. And then they sat down and they had the second course. She had soup, whatever she had there for him. And then he was again overwhelmed with emotion and with excitement. He grabbed his wife again, Shopsy the bookbinder with his wife, Pedal. Both of them are dancing a second dance. And they're dancing. And then he sits down and they had dessert, whatever, they finished. And he gets up a third time and he dances and dances with just incredible joy. How do we know what this story? What happened was, many miles away, he was sitting, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the holy Baal Shem Tov, was sitting Friday night, and the Baal Shem Tov makes Kiddush, and right after Kiddush, the Baal Shem Tov gives a chashmeichel, this huge smile, his whole face lights up. A little while in the meal, the Baal Shem Tov tzalacht sich, the Baal Shem Tov laughs again. He's laughing a second time. And a little while later, the Baal Shem Tov laughed a third time. Now, all the chassidim that are there with the Baal Shem Tov, this is back, by the way, if you get the years correct, this is maybe 4 years after the Yisgalus of the Baal Shem Tov. It's pretty early in the Nesius of the Baal Shem Tov, but there was already a Chavraya condition. And they're wondering, the Baal Shem Tov laughed, the Baal Shem Tov is laughing. What? They don't say anything. Motzei Shabbos, the minig was that Reb Zev Wolf Kitzes, senior student of the Baal Shem Tov, would go into the Rebbe while the Baal Shem Tov would smoke, I think his Lilke, and Lilke, and he would ask like certain things. So they asked, he says, would you, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, will you tell us what was the laughter last night? So he says, I'm going to show you b'muchish, I'm going to show you what happened. The Baal Shem Tov took his Talmidim, he told Alexei to put together the wagon. He took together the group, they went in, and they gefunden. They arrived in the town of Apta. And when they came over there, the Baal Shem Tov said to them, they took him there. They heard the Baal Shem Tov's fame was going around. It was already known in the area. So the Rosh HaKol, whoever it was excited. He heard the Baal Shem Tov is here. They brought him into the house and everything. And the Baal Shem Tov says they should call the bookbinder. Shopsy the bookbinder. And the Rosh HaKol said, what's after Shopsy? The simple fellow. Baal Shem Tov said, no, bring me Shopsy. So Shopsy came to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said to him, tell us what happened Friday night. And Reb Shopsy was a little uncomfortable. What Reb Shopsy said, I'm sorry, Rebbe, I hope if I did something wrong, I'm asking the Eibishter to forgive me. And he told the story. And he repeated the whole story, how he was there, and how he danced with his wife, and he danced the second time, and he danced the third time. And when he concluded the story, he tells the Baal Shem Tov that the Eibishter should be meichel me, but you should know I did it with sincere heart, because that's what I felt. I felt such thankfulness to the Eibishter, and therefore we danced. And the Baal Shem Tov said, you should know that when you were dancing, and your wife together with your wife, you were dancing those 3 times, the whole Palmalia Shalmaila were dancing with you. The ganze Himmel hat gerascht. And then the Baal Shem Tov said to him, that he asked him, he has a choice. Either I can give you Ashiras, or I can give you a bracha for children. And he said, what's the one? Ashiras? We're already an older couple. What do we need Ashiras for? We don't have a child. What's this? Give us a bracha for children. The Baal Shem Tov says, you're going to have a child, and you should name this child for me. So that's what happened. And according to some, the Baal Shem Tov said, call me as a sandik. And there's yesh oimrim that the Baal Shem Tov came to be the sandik of the Kozhnitzer Magid. It's shmua, yes or no, veis benish klor, but it's interesting. The Baal Shem Tov said you should call him Yisrael, even though the Baal Shem Tov was alive then. This is still many years later. The Baal Shem Tov passed away in Tov Kuf Chav. But this is the story about the birth of the holy of the Heilige of Yisrael, Kozhnitzer, the Kozhnitzer Magid. It was with between these. This is the reka of that birth, which is very, very, very powerful, very special. And as we're going to see that the Kozhnitzer Magid, before we get, we see that the dancing was part very powerful in his life. I want you to picture just a little machzeh. This is besides that beautiful moment of that couple, the elderly couple dancing, but there was something, an amazing machzeh. Those who write testimony about what they saw when they came to the Kozhnitzer Magid, as I mentioned to you earlier, the Kozhnitzer Magid was so thin and so weak And when they write, when he would come into davening, when he would come into shul, when he would come into davening, there were two shudos. They had people. And he had two gaboim walking, and they were holding him, and they walked with candles. The Kozhnitzer used to walk into shul holding a little Sefer Torah. And as he walked into the shul holding the Sefer Torah, he would walk to the Aron HaKodesh, and when he got to the Aron HaKodesh, he would start dancing with the Sefer Torah. He would dance. This is daily. When he would come into shul, he would dance with the Sefer Torah, dance and dance. Then he would put the Sefer Torah in the Amud, in the Aron HaKodesh, and then he would go to the Amud, and again, right by the Amud, he would start dancing again. And then he would start davening, and it was like a fiery davening. And again, it's a person that the moment davening was over, he fell right into a bed and couldn't move. He was so weak. But as I mentioned earlier, there was koivei Hashem yachlifu koyach. So there's dancing that was still from his father and his mother, that they brought him his neshama into this world. Oh, so I was going to say, the Karliner said that the Baal Shem Tov, when he brought them this neshama, and he told them they should name him Yisrael, he was mamshich into the Kozhnitzer Magid, the kedusha, the holiness, that it takes a tzaddik's 80 years of avodah to get to that holiness. He downloaded to him right then to start with. Before you even moved anywhere, he started already with that holiness. Before I forget, the Rebbe's Atzei Chaim from the Rebbe's Sefer Torah was the Atzei Chaim from the Kozhnitzer Magid. Yeah. So there's some more connections we'll talk about later. So Moshe, take us. Chaim, I get to walk.
Shalom, shalom,
Chaye,
Yeah, no. Let's sing it for 25 hours straight.
I'll speak more than you sing.
All I need, you know what I mean? Yeah. All I need is a million.
Yeah, dry run.
It was all warm up. I could sing all night.
Chaye.
Vai, vai. Vai, vai. Tell me vai, vai. Where's Anne? How do you know? Like this one out there. I got a modern house that's gutted and full of shit.
So from the Heilige Kozhnitzer Magid, Yidden, Chaim, Rabbi Velvel.
Mashiach should come, should know you by name.
Mashiach here yesterday already. Chaim.
What's up, brother?
So the holy, the Kozhnitzer Magid, the stories they tell about him is really in terms of him being a miracle worker. So here's a stunning story, literally a stunning story of it. This is a story told about him. And on the Kozhnitzer Magid, we can believe such a story. A woman once came to him, and she was an aguna, means her husband disappeared. And it's been many years. Her husband left her, and she had no idea where he is. And meanwhile, she was stuck because she needed it. She didn't have it. She couldn't marry anybody else, and a get she didn't have. And she was it was very difficult for her. So she came and she poured out her heart to the Kozhnitzer Magid, and the Kozhnitzer Magid asked her if you would see him, you would recognize him. She said, "Of course I would recognize him. My husband, of course I would recognize him." So the Kozhnitzer said, "Bring me a bowl of water." So they brought him a bowl of water, and he told her, "Look inside, look inside." She looks inside and she sees a city. That's a city. She's looking and she sees the city, and then she sees the market. And she sees a whole market with wagons and people buying and selling. Literally, it's all there on the screen. Like we can watch it on a screen. It's in the bowl of water. So he tells her, look on the street. She's looking on the street. And then he as she's watching, it opens up. It's like zooming in. So first she has the whole city, then she has the market, then she has a certain street, and then it stops him right in front of a house. And it says outside Taylor. And he tells her, look in the window. She looks inside the window. And there he is. Her husband is there. And he's working, and he has a few workers, and he's talking, and he's busy making something. So he's making this pair of gloves. He was tailoring some kind of fancy, thing ago. So the Kozhnitzer Magid is standing next to her, and he says, grab one of them. So she says, what? He says, take one of them. So she sticks her hand in, and she just pulls out, and she has a glove in her hand, and it's still hot because it came right off the press. She's holding it, and he says, okay. They take away the water, and he says, Gela Shalom. Go find him. She says, where do I look? Where did it? He says, go. Okay, she says, take the glove with you. So she has the glove with her, and she goes. She comes outside, and she's looking where, she doesn't know where to go. Suddenly a wagon pulls up, the guy, and he says to her, he says, get on the wagon. He was with someone else. So she gets on the wagon, and together they go. And he's riding, and suddenly he ends up in the middle of a forest. And he comes to a screeching halt, and he stops the wagon. He says, get off. So she says, get off. Wow, we're in a wagon. He yells at her. She's scared. She gets off, and he disappears. And she's on the wagon there in the middle of the forest. Basically, again, she's lost. She starts walking. She's suddenly at the edge of a city. So she comes out into the city. She said, this is the city. This is the city that she lives. But I forgot who she was with. She was with someone who was with her on this thing. So she says, but I know, she says, we have to go to the market. So they find the market. They start walking down the market. Then she finds the street. So she walks down the street, and there's the tailor shop. She looks in the tailor, and there's her husband. So now but she can't, he's gonna deny it, isn't it? So she decides, she goes to the Rav of the city. She comes to the Rav of the city, and she says to him that I'm from Kozhnitzer, and I came over here, and I know my husband is in town. He's in Taylor. He works over there. And he's my husband, and he's the, I just want you to know, please help me out. So he sends right away to call the tailor, and she's not in the room. And he starts asking him, tell me, so what do you do? He's a tailor. He says, and you're married? He says, of course I'm married. You know I'm married. I have a wife and children. He says, were you ever married before? He says, no. He says, you're sure you're not married? Well, he says, no. So he says, tell me, today, I think she said she had this, she arrives, but maybe yesterday, she says, what happened when you were tailoring? Anything interesting? He said, the craziest thing ever happened. I'm sitting over there working. I have I'm working with these gloves. I'm tailoring and making. And out of nowhere, one of the gloves just starts flying in the air. And it goes right outside. And I didn't know what happened to it, where it came from. It was crazy. So the Rav says, and if I give you the second glove, the pair that you lost, he said, okay. So he calls the woman in, and he says, because she told the Rav that what happened with it. And now he said, oh. So he was made there right then and there, that he had forsaken his wife and not given her a get. Now she had the second glove. And obviously, he did what he needed to do. They gave the get, and she was free. And that was a pretty cool story. There are stories of Tzadikim, but this is moving a little bit out of time and space, and moving in, moving through a bottle of water, where you need to be.
What's Hollywood Shem?
Yeah. Similar story, if it's saying a story with this kind of thing, that a Yid once came. In other words, the ability to be able to move things around, remote control, was one of the classics by the Kozhnitzer. So one time, someone came to him and he complained that the puddets in his town it's decided to evict him. He's kicking him out. He's throwing him. He's told him he better leave, and he's throwing him out. So the Kozhnitzer Magid said to him, he says, "Go make yourself a play rifle, a play gun." So he goes and he takes something. He tells me, "Yeah, this is good." He says, "And now stand over here and shoot." He says, "In my room over here, shoot." So he gives and he shoots. He says, "Okay, Kenskein." The guy goes home. And when he comes back to town a while later, maybe it took him a few days later, he gets back to town. He hears that the Puditz is dead. And the story is that he was playing with his gun, and somehow the gun went off and it killed him accidentally. He shot himself, and he was done. So you need to do things. Yeah, Kozhnitzer right. Yes.
God,
So this is the journey of the Kozhnitzer Magid. Even though he was born as a by a brach of the Baal Shem Tov, but how does he get to the Baal Shem Tov? How did he get to Chassidus? Chassidus was then at its very, very birth, its very, very beginning. So here's the story with the Kozhnitzer Magid as a very young child. As I mentioned earlier, he was born and he was very weak physically. His parents watched over him very much, but he was an enormous masmid, an enormous diligent boy. Obviously, it's an incredible neshama. And he sat and learned Yom V'Layla, day and night. When he was 7 years old, he's already written in to be part of a certain chevra. There was a chevra in the city of Ab. This chevra, different groups. This chevra was called Chevra Ner Shel Shabbos Kodesh. Ner Tamid Shel Shabbos Kodesh. That was the name of this chevra, of this group. There was a leader of the group. His name, actually, had. Hold on, I'll give you the name too. The leader of this group, a big tzaddik and a big. Hold on. Okay. Moshe Nassim Nata Shapiro. He was the head of this group. It's written. If they found this. This is a kuntres where they found that when he was 7 years old, he's joining into this chabura, into this group. They called him, this boy was called the Sharp Yisrael. They called him Yisrael Charif, the Sharp Yisrael. One of the rules in that group, it said that if you didn't come, those who didn't come to the shir at least three times a month to hear the shir from whoever was giving the shir and whatever, the head of the Moshe Nassim Nata, so he gets punished that the next whole months you never give him an aliyah. Like the different minhagim they used to have with the groups, with the thing. And this little boy, he already joined that group. When he was a little older, he went to learn over here, he went to learn over there. He was a very big masmid. His father, it's an interesting story, was on a Hanukkah night. His father had warned him. The father was very unhappy, this Reb Shapsi, that on Hanukkah, the kids, the Bachrim, whatever, would play cards. They used to play cards. And, it was one of the Avedas that everybody did, but it was one of the things that those were sensitive, they were very against playing. They used to play real cards. What are they called? The ace cards, whatever they are. How do they call them? Cards. And it was considered Nishka Gutazach. But the guys would do it. His father was afraid to let him stay in Beis Medrash late because he was afraid that he would go join the card playing. So he wanted to go so badly to learn that he begged his father to let him stay, and he promised his father that he has one candle, and the candle is going to burn out. So when the candle burns out, then he's coming home. And they used to have candles, which This was an hour candle, this was a 2-hour candle, this was a 3-hour candle. So he took a place one, it was like a 2-hour candle, and then he's coming home. He lit the candle. But because his learning was on a whole different level, and he was an incredible neshama, he became the Neis Chanukah with the candle. The candle burned and burned and burned and burned. It burned the entire night till the morning. He knew that he's allowed to stay until the candle was burning. So from time to time, he looked up and he says, "Oh, it's Neshtois Kibbutz." So he continued learning. In the morning, it's a day already. He comes home. So his father was sure that he was out with it because that's what the guys would do. They would verbring all night long, playing cards and living and drinking and stuff like that. And the father was sure that that's what happened. So his father gave him a pusik and he gave him a patch too. It was a whole situation. The Kozhnitzer said later that I didn't want to tell my father what happened because I didn't want to be mishtamish b'kisra shel Torah. He didn't want to use it. So b'shum oifen he wasn't going to say. So he got all the patch and he was a little kid. In any case, he as he got older, he somehow came through different places where he learned. He learned over here, learned over there. And there was a yeshiva in Richville. Richville is a town, led by the Shmelke of Nicholasburg. Shmelke of Nicholasburg is one of the early students of the holiness Magid. A goy and adir, an incredible genius of geniuses. And Shmelke started a yeshiva. And the Kozhnitzer Magid went to learn in that yeshiva. Now he had already a connection to Hasidus because at a certain time he learned in the town of Pshischa, and at Pshischa there was a Yid, his name was Rebbe Avram, who was a Talmud of the Baal Shem. And this Rebbe Avram influenced this kid a lot because he saw in him that he's not as pashut the boy. And he told him to go to the yeshiva in Richville by the Shmelke. At that yeshiva, there was a very rigid schedule. Those boys that are complaining of the rigidity of the schedule in yeshiva, I'd like you to know what was going on in that yeshiva. The schedule of the yeshiva was like this. 14 hours a day was learning. Seder was 14 hours a day. Now again, 14 hours of learning. 4 hours was for Shachris, Mincha, and Mayim. 4 hours, not like 2 hours. 4 hours was for davening because Reb Shmelke was a chassid, and they spent time davening. So you got around 18 hours. What are we left with? 14, 4. And then 4 hours for sleep. 4 hours was for sleep. 1 hour, so 22 hours. 1 hour was community work. You have to, if you're there in the community, you have to help out. You have to do stuff, help out. A half an hour eating time. And a half an hour rest. The half an hour rest, the Reb Shmelke used to give a shir on Chayvus Aldonis. That was during the rest hour, half an hour. So and anybody who wasn't ready to for this serious, rigid schedule was not able to keep up in the yeshiva. This was the yeshiva. So he learned over there, and over there he already pumped it in Chassidus and the Kozhnitzer Magid was a renowned Go'an Oilam. He was a Goyim. And this is even the Mesnagdim were moided to that. Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes. No, he didn't write it. It's written in a sefer by, I don't know the name, Rabbi Yaakov someone. I forgot that, and he even said the name of the sefer. Writes that when he was in Volozhin, he met Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and he had a discussion with him. And the Volozhiner told him that wegen the Yisrael of Kozhnitz, I want to tell you, he said, that in my Shnoitz Golus, the great people used to do Golus. And Golus means you would go out and take upon yourself difficulties. So he traveled. I arrived at Kozhnitz, and I spent an entire day being befalful and learning with Rabbi Yisrael of Kozhnitz. He says, I can tell you that Shas he knew word for word with all the Tosfos Baal Peh, literally the entire Shas with word Baal Peh, and his yediyah was in the ba'ofen shel hagoyim. He was a goyim. He wasn't stam. Saying his tzidkis and his tzaddik came along with an incredible knowledge. In addition to that, he was one of the biggest mikubalim. And even amongst the Chassidish Rebbes, if you look even in the Sefer Avodas Yisrael, is an enormous amount of Kabbalah, and he was an enormous makubal. Before he went to the Mizrich Magid, he had already learned 800 Sifrei Kabbalah. 800, a lot, 800 Svarim. Count 800 Svarim. It's an enormous amount of them. Who even knows of 800 Sifrei Kabbalah? If you go to over any makubal and start asking, where do you have 800 Sifrei Kabbalah? I don't know. But as I state, at Gilad, if you go in the earlier makubal, where they get so many Svarim? As I state, 800 Sifrei Kabbalah. When he came, maybe it also means, including, I don't know if you want to question the story, maybe it means also Sfarim, Sifrei Machshava, that they were. He was also a very big Maral person. He was the one who had the Maral printed. It was only printed once all the time, and he had it printed again. He wrote a Pirush on Amal. He wrote a Pirush on Rizil Amalach. He was very, very. So when he came to the Magid the first time, because Reb Shmelk of Nicholasburg told them to go to the Magid. So when he came to the Magid, this was the story. He was already known as a very special yid. He wasn't Staman. The wagon driver that took him to Mezrich, he hired this wagon driver, didn't have what to pay him. So the deal was like this. He stopped in every village, and the wagon driver said, I have a yid tzaddik in the wagon. So the women came out with the children to get brachas, and he benched them, and they gave money, and that's how he matched for the Haitzah Saderech, and for to pay the wagon driver. When he came to Mezrich, it's interesting. He could have seen the Baal Shem Tov very easily, because the Baal Shem Tov passed away when he was about, Tov Tzadik Zayin, Tov Kochov, when he was 23 years old. You could have seen the Baal Shem Tov, but for whatever reason, he didn't. When he came to the Magid, as soon as he arrived in Mezrich, he ran to an Achsanya, a place where he was staying, to put away his Svarim. He traveled with a bunch of Svarim. To put away his Svarim and the few stuff that he had, and he found a locker. They had a locker there. So he had this locker in it, and he comes running to the Magid. Outside from the Magid was sitting Reb Yisrael, Reb Shloime, the one who wrote, I forgot his name, Reb Shloime of Lutsk, one of the Talmidei Magid, the one who printed the Svarim of the Magid was Reb Shloime of Lutsk. He was the Meshamash. He was standing outside, and so he asked permission to come see the Magid. As he comes into the Magid, and he tells the Magid that the Yugaman from Poland came, and he wants to see you. So the Magid said, mit seine Tirdes, with his machshavas and Tirdes Olam Haza, he wants to come into me to see me. With his thoughts of worldly things, he wants to come see me. He rejected. So he comes out and he tells him what the Magid said. And he said, Oi, what happened was that right at that moment when he went in to speak about to the Magid about him, he had realized when he went to the locker, if you remember, that when he went to the locker, he left the key inside the thing, and he didn't take the key. So it occurred to him, and he started thinking, "Oy Gaval, what's going to be?" And that's what he was thinking when Reb Shloime Lutzka went in right then. Then he was thinking about his chafetzim. So the Magid said, "Er kommt mit seiner machshavas of tirdes olam haza, and this is the way he wants to see me." So he ran back over there. He took care of whatever he needed to do. He cleared himself a little bit. After this intense preparation, this was an intense preparation that he did. I think that's when he spent a lot of time learning Kabbalah and so on and so forth before he came. Then he came into the Magid. The Magid asked him, "Where are you from?" And he said the town that he's in. And the Magid said, "I think, how far is that from Varsha?" And he said how far it's 12 parsa, whatever that amount was. And the Magid said, "Oh, Baruch Hashem, jetzt." He says they're going to start saying in the shuls of Varsha that mezogen keser yitnu lecha. In other words, the Magid predicted that the Yisrael of Kozhnitzer was going to be one of the biggest ones who are going to drive Chassidus into Poland. And the Magid said that in Varsha they're going to start saying. The Magid, according to the way it's written, the Magid was very excited when he came. Again, I didn't see this in Chabad sources, but I did see it in Toldus of the Kozhnitzer in Avodas Yisrael in the back. He said that the Magid then said to the Alter Rebbe that the Baruch Hashem, the Eibishter sent me someone like him, who's a huge yadin in Kabbalah. He said, and he can be Magid the Siddur. By the way, I'm going to say is that the Kozhnitzer Magid said that after all the 800 Sifrei Kabbalah that he learned, when he came to the Magid, he saw he knows nothing, and therefore he needed to give him a whole Seder Alimud and a whole Derech and whatever. He really didn't. But the Magid went and appointed the Kozhnitzer Magid to be Megi a Ksav Yad. The Magid had Kisve Yad Siddur of the Arizal. So the Magid handed this Kisve Yad over to the Kozhnitzer Magid to be Magi on the Siddur. The Kozhnitzer Magid spent 12 weeks by the Magid. Now, and I saw this in Chabad source. They write that this was the Ksav Yad of the Siddur that the Alter Rebbe used when he sorted out Nusach Hari. So I said the Alter Rebbe sat with many, but this was one of them. Could be this is what he means, send me the Ksav, and I'm not exactly sure what he meant. I showed him today a letter. The Alter Rebbe sends a letter to the Kozhnitzer Magid. It's in the Geniza Charsonis. They found the Geniza. And in that Geniza, there's a letter from the Alter Rebbe to the Kozhnitzer Magid. And the Alter Rebbe says to him like this, I am sending you something very special. I'm sending you the pan that the Rebbe, the Mezritcher Magid, wrote to the Baal Shem Tov. When the Magid gave a pan to the Baal Shem Tov, a Pidyon Nefesh, that pan I am sending to you. And this is he said, the Rebbe gave it to me. The Magid gave it to me. And the Magid says, this is the first pan I ever wrote and I gave to the Baal Shem Tov. So that Pidyon Nefesh, the Alter Rebbe said, I'm sending now to you the Kozhnitzer Magid. But I want an exchange, I want the Ksavim. I want you to send me the writings. Doesn't say what writings. And he says, the bread is in your hands. And he says, this is more chaviv to me, this is more precious to me than anything in the world, this pan that I'm sending to you. But I want that in exchange. If you wanted to have the pan or you want to have the ksavim. But this is the conversation. The other interesting, we're talking about the Alter Rebbe with the Kozhnitzer Magid. Some say, again, it's hard, these things are just b'shmua, so we don't really have a clear tradition. Because according to the Toldos of the Kozhnitzer Magid brought in Sefer Avodas Yisrael, over there it says that he was only 12 weeks by the Magid, and he never saw the Magid again. It was 3 months that he sat by the Magid, and it says that the Magid said, I'm going to catch you up in these 12 weeks, I'm going to catch you up of all the teachings I've done all the years. And the Magid gave him, like he loaded him, he downloaded him with a whole lot. That's what they say over there. It's hard for me to accept that because today we saw a different. I showed him that there's a letter of also in the Geniza Charsonis. Geniza Charsonis was a certain stash of letters which they found, and over there was old letters from the Baal Shem Tov and this and that. And in Chabad, it is accepted they're valid. There was a whole question if it's valid, these letters, if it's authentic, if it's not authentic. Chabad, it's accepted. The Rabbein, Chabad Rabbein felt. Over there's one letter where the Talmidim of the Magid sent the Alter Rebbe with another Talmid, Rebbe Ziel, as a shliach b'shem all the Chavraya Kadisha. The Alter Rebbe was the shliach to the Baal Shem Tov's caver in Mezhebush to daven for the health of the Magid. And on it is signed, it's beautiful, just to read the list who signed on there. Rabbi Levi, it's like a Berditchev, Rabbi Nachum of Chernobyl, this one, that one. It's like the list is magnificent. And amongst them is Rabbi Yisrael of Kozhnitzer. It's hard for me to imagine that he was only there 12 weeks, and unless you say that all this happened just at that time. According to the Chabad tradition, also some say that he was the one that Alter Rebbe met first when he came to Mezrich. Was Rabbi Yisrael of Kozhnitzer. That was the first person that he met. What I could tell you is that the Alter Rebbe writes in the other letter, just very, very nice idea. The Alter Rebbe writes in another letter, he's writing this letter to the Apterov, Rabbi Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt. Rabbi Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt looked like had received certain negative things against the Alter Rebbe. There was a fight, a machlokes that started against him. So they came to and they told him certain things. And the Alter Rebbe, and he sent a letter to the Alter Rebbe saying, I heard about you so and so. And the Alter Rebbe sends a letter back, and he says, I'm so glad that you wrote this letter because it would have been the worst thing in the world, chas v'sholem, if someone like you would bear a grudge in your heart against me. So I'm happy that you're telling me because it's all sheker v'chazav. He said it's not true, and he says, and to my witnesses, you want to know who my witnesses are? You can ask my mechutner, Rabbi Yitzchak or Baditche, and you speak to Rabbi Yisrael of Kozhnitzer. And from Zayt Tzvei Vestoheden, they'll vindicate me. So you see, he mentions him. Benegay the Kozhnitzer, it is known that the Kozhnitzer used to learn Tanya with his Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin every day. He used to learn Tanya with his Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. When Abba Osher of Stalin, his student, asked him, "My high to learn with Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, can you have Seder with others from to learn Tanya?" He said, "This Sefer is Torah from Gan Eden." That's what he said. This Sefer is Torah from Gan Eden, and the Mechaber from this Sefer is so great that he could say Torah to Mashiach. This is what he says, that he is so great as can sagen Torah to Mashiach Tzaddikim. And so here I can't contain myself, so I'm going to throw this in. And from them and let him the Rebbe Torah. Ganz Torah from them. There's all Torah from Alter Rebbe. So it's interesting how, after these words, he said, he can. Very, very special. In any case, back to what I was saying. So when he came to the Magid, he was making the Siddur of the Arizal. And he spent there for a while, and then became a chassid. Then he left. After the Magid's Histalkus, he chose to go to the Melech of Lazensk. You see, there were two main Rebbes that became head Rebbes after the Magid passed away. Remendel of Vitebsker became the Rebbe for all the Talmidim that were in Russia. In Russia, that all the Karliner, they're flying out of Karlin, and they all clung to the Mendel of Vitebsker. And the Polisher all went to follow Rebbe Lamelech. The Kozhnitzer Magid said that and he was really a colleague with Rebbe Lamelech. He said that really in Kabbalah and so on and so forth, I know much more than him. That's what he said. But in Mesiris Nefesh, in Ibzich Geben zum Ebersten with Mesiris Nefesh, Rebbe Lamelech. And here's the magnificent story of the Yisrael of Kozhnitz coming to Rebbe Melech the first time. It was known that Rebbe Melech, when you came to him, if he was makabel upon him, you knew things are good. If he didn't want to see you, it was very risky when you decided to go to Rebbe Melech, because you knew that when you get X-rayed as soon as you're walking in, and if he wants to see you or not. Anyways. The Kozhnitzer Magid came to the holy Rebbe Melech, and Rebbe Melech happened to be sleeping at that time, so they didn't let him in. He took it immediately as a fact that he's not worthy, and his avodah is whatever, and so he left with a broken heart. He went back to his achsanya, and he was weeping and crying uncontrollably, because he's not roy to go see the Rebbe. He's not roy to see the Rebbe. It hurt him. It broke him. He was sharp, and he was crying and crying. Couldn't come to himself. Meanwhile, the Melech wakes up, and the Melech starts asking, "Who came? Who came? Who came?" And they told him, "It's a younger man. Someone was here. Whatever." Melech said, "Where is he?" So he went to look for him, and he found him. And he said, "What?" He says, "You should know, Malach Metatron woke me up." And he said, "Why are you sleeping? I have schlafste erwähnt. You have a guest like the Yisrael is here. Like, why are you sleeping?" So Malach Metatron woke up Rebbe Melech because the Kozhnitzer Magid is here, and he has to go see him. So we're seeing just an idea of what kind of levels we're talking about and who's involved. Reb Shapsi, the Kozhnitzer Magid father, passed away when he was about 24 years old. Shapsi lived a long life. He lived until, according to this, he was born when he was 70 years old, as his father. So Reb Shapsi passed away at 94 or 93. They buried him in Apta. The Kozhnitzer Magid used to come every year to Apta to visit his father's grave for the Yartzah. Every year he would come. Even later, after he was his big Rebbe, he would come always to his father's see him. One year, and the later years when he would come, then there was another Rebbe in Apta, the Apta Rav. Then when he was there, later he became a Rebbe Mezhevish, the Apta Rav. But it was when he was in Apta, he used to be his guest. So the Apta Rav, and with 1 year was a big snow. So the Apta Rav sent his chassidim to shovel the snow to create a path for the Kozhnitzer Magid to go to his father's tziyun. They made a path, and the Kozhnitzer Magid went to the Beis HaChaim, and he had a whole entourage, and the Apta Rav also came along. But when he got to the entrance of the Beis HaChaim, he went in himself together with one shamus. not his Shabbos. The Gabbai of the Beis HaChaim there, the Shabbos of the Beis HaChaim went inside, and everybody else stayed outside. But they wanted to see the Kozhnitzer Magid, so people would stood up outside the fence, and they were like high up, and they were all looking. Suddenly, the Kozhnitzer Magid picks up his head. He sees them all standing, and they see the Kozhnitzer Magid looks up, and he starts waving to them. So they figured that he doesn't want them to look. So they all got down because he's waving them like this. Then he came out, and when he's coming out, he asked, "Where's everybody?" They said, "You waved everybody away." He said, "I wasn't waving to you." And he said, when he came into the Beis HaChaim, all the dead rose up, and they came up to be Makabel Planim because he was. So he was waving them at the Gezukt. And he says, and you want to know the truth? He says, if you don't believe me, he says, the Shamas Mistamat Euch Gezeh. The Shamas of the Beis HaChaim also saw. When he came out, he verified the story that everybody, and he said something else. He said that when the Kozhnitzer Magid was by his father's grave, he was sitting and leaning on the tzia, and he was leaning on it, and he was strong in dveikus. And then he came off, and he had a big smile on his face, and he said, "The Tata, my father, was a bookbinder. He bound Svarim, and I just binding all the world, all the world, one with the other. My father was a bookbinder, and I bound all the olamas together." One time, we're talking about his father, Reb Shapsi, just to see one time was after Hakafis. And the Kozhnitzer Magid, that Hakafis was like an incredible glow on his face, and his simcha was beyond. His son-in-law, his name is Reb Zelig, asked him, "My high this year more than every year." He said, "You should know, my father, Reb Shapsi, he shares a heichal in Gan Eden. They're roommates, him and Yochai, the father of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So they're roommates together. So Reb Yochai said to Reb Shapsi, 'Please take me to your son's Hakafis. And in exchange, I'll take you on Lag B'Omer to the Heichel Rashbi. So, I'll get you in. They come, they scan you in. I'll get you in to the Heichel Rashbi on Lag B'Omer, and you take me with you to your son's Hakafis.' So he says, "No, Yochai was there. It was inspiration. It was an act. It was an added energy." Anyways, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people who the Pamalia Shalmaila shuddered for them. The bells. Let's think about who the Talmidim were, the students. Just you go through the list. The biggest Rabbeim, the biggest Tzadikim were the students. Reb Shalom of Belz, Reb Asher of Stolin, the Chedushei Harim, Reb Bunim of Pshischa, Reb David Lelever. You're talking about the giants of all Hasidic. Reb Mendel of Kotsk, the Bnei Yissaschar went to him. The Naftali of Ropshitz. You're talking about they shared. They would go to the Chayz of Lublin, and they would go. What happened was like this: when the Melech of Lezhensk passed away, the Melech of Lezhensk was only Rebbe for 13 years. When he passed away, he split himself into four of his students. Four students. The four students were four students. And Reb Zusha said, this is the Polish tradition. Obviously, this is a real Polish of art. Reb Zusha said about that the whole Seder Ishtalshalus of Chassidus. Again, this is not the Chabad version, but the Polish Chassidus, the whole Seder Ishtalshalus of it comes from V'nohar Yotzei Me Eden. So he said Eden is the Baal Shem Tov. Nor is the Magid. Lahashkes es Agan, the Gan is Rebbe Lamelach. Misham Yiparei, then from there it splits v'ayel Abor Roshim. The four leaders of Chassidus in Poland. Who were they? So to Reb Yisrael of Kozhnitzer, he said the Ramelech said, "I'm giving you my heart." To Reb Mendel of Rimmer, he said, "I'm giving you my moyach." To the Chayzer from Lublin, he said, "I'm giving you my vision." The eyes of that's what he's called the Chayzer, the one who sees. And Rabbi Ta'apterov, he said, I'm giving the koyach hadibur, the power of speech. So this was the Magid, the Kozhnitzer Magid, this incredible holiness, incredible tzaddik. And his love for Yidden. Here's another interesting story I saw today. It's just funny. Some of the stories are really funny. His sister passed away. And Min Hashemayim, they allowed her to say she didn't want to go up there. She'd rather hang out by her brother. So they let her stay in her brother's house after she passed away. So he had a sister, Neshama, living with him over there. They used to bring him. And I don't know if she's older or younger. She was in the house. They used to bring the Kozhnitzer Magid had a sister. He didn't have any children. Oh, that's a good to a good to Shai. So number one, let me go back. I didn't have the Shaila. I Bechlal didn't have the Shaila. But what I did see in the Toldos, when they write about his mother, Perel, and said that Yesh Oimrin, that this was a second wife to, and they had another son, and his name was Hirsch, from the other wife. So once you say there was other children already from another thing, it's possible there was a Schwester there too. So again, I don't know the story is true even, but again, as Amai says, I read today that he had a sister, and the sister, she was in the house. That he used to raise a lot of almanis, a lot of Yisayimim, parents, orphans would be raised in his house, and his wife would make them clothing and so on and so forth. When Seichlim would come and sell the clothing, when Tzadikim would come, when merchants would come and bring the clothing, and they would ask for a certain price, so his sister was his price checker, was his thing. He would ask her, he would turn to her. Again, no one saw her, and he would say, "No, is this right, or are they ripping me off?" And she would say, "Her Mavinus, and this and that," and based on that, he would buy. Then what happened was, she was telling him that there's people in his he had Masharsim, he had different people in the house that were working, whatever. And she started talentating, and this one is gamvening this, and this one is stealing that, this one is cut the piece of meat that he wasn't supposed to, and this and that. So that's when he got very upset, and he said, Timinish Katavis, go to your resting place. Leave me alone. So that he dismissed her. Dealing with someone who was able to, he was known to be a huge tzaddik masakin neshamas. He would call people from the cemetery when he needed. Here's the famous story. I'll tell you, Mommy, we'll go niggin afterwards. But the famous story of everybody. This is the story written in his books. Who's the books? Not Talks and Tales. The storyteller. This is the story that is a famous story with the Kozhnitzer Magid. Is that there was a couple that didn't have any children, and they came to the Kozhnitzer Magid, they asked for a bracha, and he gave them a bracha for children. And then he gave them a bracha for children. And then a while later, the child became very sick. And the father was so sick that the father had already he was a simple man. He was totally miyayish on it, and he thought this kid will never be better and so on. But the mother went to the Kozhnitzer Magid again. She asked for a bracha. He gave a bracha for a refuah, but the kid was still very sick. So she would not stop. She wouldn't take her eye off her child all the time. And one time, as she was sitting at the child, she fell asleep. And she's sleeping, and suddenly she wakes up. And she sees a soldier, a guy, someone's feeding the baby with medicine. So she jumped. Who's the soldier? Middle of her house. She terrified. She yelled, and they ran out of the house. So she was terrified. She and her husband were just beside themselves. The soldier came, where? And they couldn't. They decided to travel to the Kozhnitzer Magid. They came to the Magid. And she told him, the Magid said, it's okay. And he sent her off. After she left, the Magid called his shamas. And he said, go to the cemetery. Go over there and call me this and this fellow. All right, he comes back with him. And he says to him, since when? Who made you as a doctor for children? What are you doing over here? Who appointed you? So he says, I'll tell you. He says, when I was drafted to the army, I lost my Yiddishkeit, basically. He was a young Jewish boy. He was drafted in the army. And I stopped keeping mitzvahs. Like I became totally negligent in everything Jewish, and I became mamish like a guy. The only thing I had a Jewish name. I knew I'm a Jew, but I had nothing. And I was total friends with everybody within the army. We were all buddies. One day we went out, and we were going through whatever. We saw this beggar, a Jew, and they started harassing him, and they wanted to take some money. They didn't have any money, but they found 75 coins, like it says, Avram ben Shivim v'chamei shana, this week in the parsha, 75. They found 75 coins in this guy's pocket. They took it from him. They robbed him. They were drunk or whatever, but they were afraid that he would go and turn them in. They would get into big trouble. So what do? You took this Jew. They took him to a tree and they tied him up and they said goodbye. So he was tied to the tree and he would have died there. He's hanging on the tree. And they left. And he says, at that moment, my Pintel Yid woke up in me. You're talking to me, I couldn't stand. So after they left, I ran back and I untied him. And fine. Meanwhile, while that's going on, they all went back and they had roll call. And they realized that I was missing. So they sent them out to go say, we're going to go search him. So they searched and they came back, they waited, and they saw him by the tree and the beggar was gone and they chapped what was going on over here. And they always knew that he's a Jew. So they figured that he released the guy. So now they were afraid that he would tell on them what happened. So they strung him up on that. They killed him. They hung him, whatever. And it says, and I died. That's what happened. This is what he tells. He's a soldier died. I came up in the Beis Shamayla. And they had a problem. I got Maiden. He says, I had no schusim, I had no mitzvahs, I had nothing that I did. I was a total, I lived like a guy. But on the other hand, I was Moise Nefesh. I saved the Yid. I saved the Yid's life. Not only that, I gave his life up to save the Yid's life. So they told me, you know what? Your schus that you're going to have is that you can heal. You can be a healer when there's sick Jewish children can still gain. So the Kozhnitzer Magid said, okay, fine. Sent them back to the cemetery. That's where the story ends. Maybe there's a longer part to the story, but that's what I saw. Interesting idea. The Kozhnitzer Magid that gearbeitet with the shamans, and so on and so forth. But before I sing the niggin, I want to give you one little something to give us understanding of once a woman came. Here's three special stories, short little nuggets, which open up the heart and who the Magid. The holy Yudah Kaddish once asked. No, the Yudah Kaddish was by the Kozhnitzer Magid. The Kozhnitzer Magid said to him, "Why is it," he said, "that on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golus I feel such light, such holiness, such a connection? I'm so second day of Golus, not the first day." So the Yudah Kaddish said to him, "When a husband and a wife get into a fight, and afterwards, when they make peace with each other, then their love amongst them is very, very strong after a good fight." And that was his explanation. And the Kozhnitzer Magid said, "Hechi nisani." Why? Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golus is from Golus, because the Eibishter got into a fight with us, and he kicked his wife out of the house. So on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golus, because it's the Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golus, the Ava and the love from Knesset Yisrael to the Eibishter is so strong, and the Kozhnitzer Magid feels it. And the second story is that a couple came to him, and they said that they want a divorce. So the Kozhnitzer Magid asked, why episode are they getting divorced? So they said, because it's not working out. He said, what's not working out? She says, they were very simple people. He says, the kugel. He says, the kugel? What's with the kugel? She says, I work hard all week long. And I wait for the kugel. I work hard so we have kugel on Shabbos. And my wife makes a really good kugel. So he says, no, it's wonderful. He says, no. But lahachas, he says, she doesn't serve the kugel until the end of the meal. She make kiddush, then she wash, she serves fish, then she serves the eggs, then she cholent, and in the end she brings the kugel. And by that time I'm full, and I don't enjoy it. I work all week for the kugel, I don't enjoy it. So he says, So he turns to her and he says, no. She says, this is the way it was done in my father's house. We used to do this, and this is the way we do it, and I don't change from what my parents did. Okay, so yeah. She doesn't want to budge. He doesn't want to budge. So the Kozhnitzer says, I have a good idea. He says, why don't you make 2 kugels? He tells him. One of them you'll bring immediately out, right after Kiddush, you'll bring a kugel out and you'll have kugel. And the second one you'll bring out after everything, you'll bring the second kugel. She said, no, that I can do. He said, fine, it's good. So the Kozhnitzer called his wife over, his own wife. He said, Roiza, come over here. And you two should make 2 kugels. One eat right away and one later. And from then on, the minig in Kozhnitzer is 2 kugels, and it's called the Shalom Bayis kugel. That's the first kugel. It's called the Shalom Bayis kugel, and that's the kugel. The other story is that a lady came to her, crying to the Kozhnitzer Magid that her husband wants to divorce her. And he asked her, why does she want a divorce? So she says, because he says I'm ugly. So the Kozhnitzer said, maybe you are. I was going to give her F shitake. So she said, she's crying, she says, but when I was under the chuppah, when we got married and I was under chuppah, I was beautiful in his eyes. So when he heard that, he said, Eivishter, he says, when we stood at Har Sinai and we stood at this, we were so beautiful. And maybe if now, but we were once so beautiful. This was his limud chus for the Yidden at that time. He was very good friends with the Holy Barditchever, so they give us a name. Don't forget the bench card.
I summon
What's your father's name? Mendel ben Alter Alter. Ariel. So, here's another very special story. Once on Purim, and a Yid, a simple Yid, very poor man, from one of the villages, not far from Kozhnitzer, decided to, either he happened to be there or he went on purpose, place exactly what, but he was in Kozhnitzer and he came inside for the reading of the Megillah. And he heard the Megillah, and it was very special. And after the Megillah, the Kozhnitzer Magid comes over to him. And the Kozhnitzer Magid asked him, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from that and that village." The Kozhnitzer Magid said, "No, those villages, this is my neighborhood. This is my area. How come you don't bring me shalach manos?" So first of all, he literally left his family without a penny. No one had anything. He's asking for them. So the Kozhnitzer said, "You know what? Come to my house." So he came with him. He came to the Rebbe, and over there they gave him to eat. They gave him l'chaim. They made him a little simcha day. And he's thinking to himself, "Look, the Rebbe, he's asking shalach manos. He has to go get him shalach manos." So he goes out and he goes into a wine shop that was there. Someone sold wine. And he says to him, he says, "Give me a nice bottle of wine." So he gives him a nice bottle. And he says, "That's not." He says, "Give me on credit." He says, "I'll pay you. And if not, it's the Purim on." Everybody was Purim. So the guy said, "Yeah, take the bottle." So he took the bottle. Then he goes into another store and they were selling fruits and stuff. He picks up, it says 3 pomegranates. What are pomegranates? Whatever pomegranates are, maybe big oranges. And he asks the person, he says, "Can you give us that?" He says, "Can I take it on credit?" He said, "Yeah." No, he said, "And if not," he says, "to put him today." So he takes the pomegranate and he comes back to the Kozhnitzer Magid and he brings him the wine and the thing and the shalach manos. And then he's thinking, he leaves and he's thinking to himself, "No," he says, "so my house shouldn't be put in. My house should also be put in." So he starts making his way through all the stores. And here he picks up a few big loaves of bread, and he says, it's the same thing, same statement. This, and if not, it's put in mind. And then he moves around, and everybody's giving him. He has now bags and bags. He travels back home, and it's quiet. It's dark in his house. He comes in, and he tells his kindle, he yells, "Put in mind." And before this still does. And meanwhile, he bought food, and everybody laid it out, and suddenly the house, they never didn't eat for days. And a party like that, and suddenly the whole house is freilich, and he's dancing with all his children and his wife, and they're all dancing, put him on. Meanwhile, there's a banging on the door, and he says, "Don't open the door, no, who's there? Our goy is there, he's going to start disturbing our purim, we're not opening the door, let the door close." And meanwhile, they're dancing, and again, the bezetz. So his wife says, "I know who that is. That's this Gentile, whatever. He helps us out. Sometimes he brings us potatoes. So let me go." So she go open the door. And she sees him there. But the guy is never swollen. He has a black and blue eye. He's cut. He's bleeding. He's cut. So they see him like this. They take him into the house. They lay him down. They wipe him up a little bit. They give him a little l'chaim over there. They bring him on that. They mint him a bissel. And he said, "What he said? They give him water, and he said, it's good you opened the door because I felt already that I was going to die outside. It was cold, and he told them, he says, my son, this guy, whatever, this and that, he beat me up like crazy. He says, but I'll tell you," he says, "that from a son like this and that, I'm not going to leave him anything." He says, "I'm not giving it to my son. I'd rather give it to you and your family. My life savings that I put away, I get the rough." So he went outside and he said, "Come with me. I'll show you where I buried my stuff." So he had this monies and stuff buried in a forest, in a place under a tree. He said, "Over there, after I die, you go over there. You'll take. Don't tell my son anything. He doesn't know where it is. Here is where it is. Take what he said." And Kachava, the guy died. They got the money. And Baruch Hashem, they were all fine. Das kennst du meistens. Remember this the mice?
Over?
Put it my yet. No, we're just starting.
Oh.
We're just starting. Chaim al-Baracha. We're waiting for you.
Everybody wants to say,
One of the things about the Kozhnitzer Magid was that he was very, very, very revered by all the noblemen in Poland. They all, his fame was very, very, so he's very influenced the non-Jews as well. They had a tremendous awe and respect for him. There was once I'd even say the name of this. Who's? It's not the yard side of the Kozhnitzer. Kozhnitzer's yard side is in Tishrei. I just did it tonight because we couldn't. Yes.
Okay.
No, because we don't get to do what? Who? Oh, that's all. So we want to wish l'chaim for the Tzikmans, for Herschel. Should be benched with all the brachas. Sponsor tonight's event, so they should bench them. And Herschel particularly, and the whole family with a lot of brachas, all that he needs and all that he wants. Panasa barchava, nachas from the kinder, alle gute Sachen. So there was a graph, a poritz. His name was Trachinsky, something like that. He came to get a blessing. He came to get a blessing for children. And when he came to get the blessing, the Kozhnitzer Magid said The Beine Shalom, after that. Als de gaat zo zeggen goyim of the world. Noem het aan één nog goy. And I said, Eberste, you have so many Gentiles in the world. It's on one more. Can you deal with one more? And he blessed him. So this, and he had a child. He didn't have children for. So this Tzadinsky, whatever his name was, used to talk to his family members about the tzaddik, you know. And his brother would laugh. His brother didn't believe, and he could laugh. So there was amongst the Goyim also, there was the Chassidim and the Misnagdim. So the Brider, the laugh. So he said, you know, you talk about this rabbi, I'll show you he doesn't know what he's doing. He says, I'm going to come to him and tell him that I have a son, that my son is very ill, and so on. And so asking for a bracha, and it's my son is not ill, but I will do that. That's fine. So he came, the brother came, and he comes into the Magid, and he starts telling him a story that the son is very, very this. So the Kozhnitzer said to him, you better run home very quickly. Maybe you'll catch him still alive. So he went running home, and by the time he got there, the guy wasn't alive anymore. The Chayzer from Lublin sent his wife. The Chayzer from Lublin sent his wife to go get a bracha from the Kozhnitzer Magid for children. And he benched her, and they had a child. And the Chayzer was mechabed the Kozhnitzer Magid with Sandikois. That trip that the Kozhnitzer went to the Chayzer from Lublin, on that journey, it was like a journey of malachim. It was like hundreds, thousands of people joined, and the Polish nobility all came out because everybody heard of him by then. It was like a very big, it's known, that trip was like, and they lined the streets and they were asking for brachas, goyim and yidden. It was a very big thing. There was one wealthy woman who came with her child. The child couldn't walk. His feet were like completely like bent in, and he had no ability to walk. He asked for a bracha for a child. He asked a Goyish woman. He asked her, he said, B'tnai, he says, are you taking upon yourself that you'll always treat the Jewish tenants with chesed and rachamim, and you're not going to raise the rent, and you're going to give them chazaka, you know, that they can stay in their places? And she promised. So he turned to the boy and he handed him his pipe, and he said, "Go fill it up with tobacco, whatever, or go light it or whatever." So the kid got up, and the kid could never walk all his life. And the kid went and he brought it in. The miracles that he did even for the guy, he was very, 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 very well known in that, and he had a tremendous respect. He and the Alter Rebbe were on the same team when it came to the war, the famous war of Napoleon and the Tsar, the Tzadikim. It was actually the Kozhnitzer Magid, the few Tzadikim that were involved in this war in a big way. The Mendel of Rimenov was, I remember where I said the four inheritors of the Melech of Lozenz. The Mendel of Rimenov once said, before I got to the Mendel of Rimenov said that anybody that's alive in our generation and did not go see the Kozhnitzer Magid is not going to merit, won't be able to see the face of Mashiach. That's what was his statement. So the Bnei Yissaschar heard that. He was a young man, the Bnei Yissaschar. And he picked himself up and immediately he ran to Kozhnitz. And when he came to the Kozhnitzer Magid first time, and when he came there, the Kozhnitzer Magid was very, as I mentioned, very ill, very weak, and he was in bed. And he had people around there, whatever, they were looking or trying to see him. And so the Bnei Yissaschar climbed up high and he looked down at the Kozhnitzer, and the Kozhnitzer looked up and he said, "Junge Mann, Beria Baal Makamia." With the vision, you're kind of. So this was, anyways, the Mendel of Rimenov was very strongly, and we spoke about this many times, held very strongly that the war of Napoleon was the war of Goy Gomorrah. And therefore he felt that Napoleon has to win this war, and even though it's going to cost a lot of Jewish blood, but we have to bring the Geulah. And he was fire for that. His student, Naftali of Ropshitz, was held like the Alter Rebbe, and he tried to distract the Mendel of Rimenov. And the Mendel of Rimenov got very upset at him because he made shtick with him.
What kind?
The Medal of Rebbe was throwing matzahs in the oven. And every time he threw the matzahs in the oven, he was saying 1,000 Russian soldiers in the oven. 1,000 Russian soldiers, every time he was throwing a matzah in. And it wasn't good because the Russian soldiers were falling when the Medal of Rebbe was throwing the matzahs, taking the matzahs. And I says, I told you, and he was saying numbers, 30,000, and he was killing them like that. So now, Naftali Ropshitz came in and he said, Napoleon is Tomei. In Tomei is Nitchet to Pesach Sheni. That's what he said. That Napoleon is Tomei. He's a Tomei person. And a Tomei gets pushed off to Pesach Sheni. And that was Mevalvel, his Machavas. And he kind of threw him off. And he was very upset at him. And he had Akped on him. So he ran to the Kozhnitzer Magid for safety.
Who?
Naftali of Ropshitz needed some protection because he was afraid of the Kapeda of his Rebbe. When he ran to the Kozhnitzer Magid had been going to the mikveh. And so what he did was he jumped into the Kozhnitzer Magid's bed. Obviously, he felt that he can lay in the Kozhnitzer Magid's bed. And when the Kozhnitzer Magid came back and he said, who's laying in my bed? So he told him basically that I'm willing to leave the bed, but I need your, so he told him it's put in shot. The Yisrael of Kozhnitz then said, Novo Tiboil, Napoleon Tiboil. Napoleon Tiboil. Napoleon is going to fall. He said, by my Rebbe Lemela, all the sudden Lamai, by my Rebbe Rebbe Lemela of Lezentz, all the sudden Lamaila were in his hand. And they wouldn't move from here to here without his permission. Das kennen wir nicht. This is what he said. This we can't. But what I could is, I forgot really the Lashon was I can put Napoleon Dredra. Anyways. Yeah, I'm saying that. But with Tzadikim, the only one that was working together, was saying there were Tzadikim that were working there with this was the Yisrael of Kozhnitz. The other Tzadikim were primarily of the following the Medal of Rebbe. But in any case, what?
They were all in the Soviet Union.
No, they were not in Russia. They were in Poland.
And Poland wasn't fighting the Poland.
Poland, no. Most of the Polish, what's it called again? Nobility, I think, were fighting. Were fighting on behalf with the Russians. I'm thinking against Napoleon, something like that. Because I don't know, based on a story that I read now today, also regarding something. Because the story was like this: there was a today I did my research. No, yesterday, today.
Weird.
I'm finding spot of it, obviously. Anyways, what happened over here is another interesting thing. That there was a Yid who left. He lived in Shtetl. He lived somewhere in this, and he left his family. Parnassa was very difficult, and he went to try his luck elsewhere. He went to England. He moved to London. Somehow, and he managed to build himself up, and he made for himself some serious money. And then, but he lived there. He never went back to his family. He had a rich man.
We're in London.
In London. And when he passed away, he was feeling that he was passing away. He sent to notify the Rav that he has a family back in Poland that really these are the Shem. And if he can please contact his family so that his money should go to his family and not to anybody else. So the Rav sent a letter and they contacted them, and the kids heard. They came to London and they took the money, whatever, how they got it is, and they went back. The two brothers, they were safekeeping their money. They were safekeeping it very, very much. And they made up a thing that if anybody has to go, they had this wagon driver that was taking them, and they had this chest of money. And the deal was that whenever one of them has to go to the bathroom or something like this, then the other one doesn't leave. He should never leave it unwatched. So happened that one of them, that he went, and maybe he was taking up his little underside over there. The other one had to go too. When they came back, there was no money there. So the brother was sure that the other brother stole the money. Because they made up, they're not going to leave it out. So he figured that. So if he did, he took it and he buried it, and he wants the whole thing for himself. So he took him to Din Torah. The Din Torah was that he's Mechuyev Shvulim. So they set up a date that he was going to come. It was right away. I don't know why. There was some kind of a delay that he was going to swear. Meanwhile, they both decided they're going to go to the Kozhnitzer Magid. They're fighting this and that. The Kozhnitzer Magid said, your brother didn't take it. He didn't take the money. But who took it? This and this guy took it. That's what he said. Obviously, Baruch HaKodesh saw things. He said, this guy took it. And I'll give you what to do, he says. What you should do is, when you come back, go to the marshal over there, the head of the military, and ask if they can do any, I don't know, I guess they must have had connections. Maybe you bribe him. Yeah, I don't have any money now, but they saw. Al Capone, get him to make to line up the soldiers. You're going to walk by, and the one who starts cursing you, that's the guy who took the money. Okay. So they come back, they line up. He somehow managed to contact the guy. The guy was willing to do it. He lines up the soldier. He walks by, and no one shouts and no one does anything. So it didn't work. So he said, "No, there's something missing. Someone. You sure everybody's here?" They thought that one guy wasn't there. So they went and they. Oh, wait. So they went and they brought this fellow back to the thing, and they lined him up again, and he walked by, and this guy started cursing them. So he said, because he had told the guy before, the guy that will curse. Anyways, they took the guy, then he put him on the floor, and he said, beat him. So they started beating him. And they tried to giving him 100 lashes, that he should be murdered, that he stole the money. And they're beating him, and they're holding already 85 lashes, and he's quiet. Suddenly, at the 85th lash, he spills the beans. And he says, yeah, he stole the money, and this is what he did with it. He put it there, and they went there. So the guy asked him, I don't understand, you're such a bulva. 85 lashes, not a peep. What happened over here? You couldn't take another 15? You would have had the money. Then wait another 15. So he said, no, he says, I saw suddenly an old man came. He held a stick on my thing. And he said that if you're not going to, if you want to live, he said, I'm going to crush your throat. If you don't, so the general, so they're telling the guy, so he's mishtaimim, who is this? That this rabbi who was able to depict exactly who the Ganef was. So he spoke to the mayor of the town. The mayor was intrigued. So he sent a group of 20 soldiers to go invite and bring the Kozhnitzer Magid because he wants to speak to him. So he came to Kozhnitz. And they told him that there's a whole group of soldiers. When they got there, they suddenly started trembling. They got such an emo pachad, they couldn't go off their horses. But they stood outside. They told the Magid that there's a bunch of soldiers outside. So the Magid said, what do they want? So they went outside, they spoke to them, and they said that the mayor of this and this has sent a whole thing that they should bring the Magid. So the one of the Magid says, tell the mayor he better stop it and leave me alone. Is what he said. Leave me alone, he said. And the proof, because if not, it won't be good for him. And the proof that I know what's going on, he says, is the 2 letters that he just sent. You should know that he switched them and he sent them to the wrong. He made a switch with the letters that he just sent. By accident. So they came back and they tell the guy, and the guy says, wow. And he's taking checks with who, whatever, where and when, and realized that he sent the wrong message. What happened was like this. This guy was such a politician, that he sent 2 letters to the Russians. He sent a letter that against Napoleon, against Samaisa, that he's standing and he's going to have his troops and he's going to try to assist them. And to the Polish guys, he sent a thing that they should join Napoleon. And whatever. By mistake, he dispatched the letters, the wrong one in which he was. So he stopped and he called him back to straighten it out. Baruch Hashem, he saved the situation. But he told him, he switched the letters. Anyways, you're dealing with, people who saw everything. But here's a beautiful story on the passing. The 3 tzadikim, the Chayzer from Lublin, the Remendel Rimanov, and the Kozhnitzer Magid all decided by the Napoleon War, what?
We were before the Alter Rebbe.
By that time, they were at the same time of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe passed away in Tavkuf Ayin Gimel, right at the defeat of Napoleon. The Kozhnitzer Magid passed away a year and a half later. Tavkuf Hey. He was older than the Alter Rebbe 7 years. He passed away Tavkuf Hey. So not Tavkuf Hey. Kuf Ayin Hey, which is in 1815. The Alter Rebbe passed away in 1813. 1812.
How old was he?
He passed away at 87.
The Alter Rebbe was 80?
The Alter Rebbe was younger.
78.
The Alter Rebbe was 60s. The Alter Rebbe was in the 60s.
So how is that possible?
The Alter Rebbe is younger,
You said by 70 years,
7 years younger,
and he passed away a year
and a year later.
So it's 9.5 years.
Yeah, so the Alter Rebbe was younger.
70. Oh,
The Alter Rebbe was 78. The Alter Rebbe was around 68.
no, but you just said he was 87.
No, 78.
78 was the
78. He went the last year. They decided together, the three of them, the Chayzer from Lublin, the Rebbe Yisrael of Kozhnitzer, and the Mendel of Rimanov decided that they have to put an end to the Golus and they have to force Mashiach's coming. That's what happened. So it was the Rebbe speaks about it. The Rebbe speaks about it in the Sichos how there was a Pa'ulis that were done, and the Rebbe mentions the Chayzer from Lublin and Tzadikim in Poland. So it was 1 year that they decided, and it was all three of them passed away that year. What happened was it was that Yom Kippur, the Kozhnitzer, the Mendel Rebbe passed away after the Alter Rebbe. The Mendel Rebbe passed away Lamed Daled Iyar, the day after Lag BaOmer, Tov Kuf Ayin Hey. Lamed Daled BaOmer, Tov Kuf Ayin Hey. Yutes Iyar, the yard site of the Mendel Rebbe. In Poland, the minhag was that if you can't go to Meron, you would go to the Mendel Rimanov on Lamed Daled BaOmer. It was huge festivities in Rimanov. He passed away a day after Lag BaOmer. The Chayzer from Lublin passed away on Tisha B'Av that year, and the Kozhnitzer Magid was the first one to go. He passed away Erev Sukkis Tov Ayin Dal. That Ayin Hey, that Yom Kippur, the Kozhnitzer Magid was was sitting by Kol Nidre, and he got to the words. This is in Ayin Hey. Yeah, this is in 1814. He's standing by the, and he says, Eberster. He has a conversation with the Eberster that everybody can hear. He says, do waste that how weak I am, how I don't have strength, I don't have an ounce of koyach. But you know that no matter that, even though without any strength that I had, yet my avoid in Chodesh Elul, and my avoid the Tishrei and the Yom Kippur, and I'm davening for the Yom, or something like that. He goes on and says, and I have no strength, and you, Al-Mechtik Eivishter, you all powerful, you infinite one, you're so powerful and so strong. You can't say 2 words. He says, Salachti Kidvarecha. Du kennst nicht sagen 2 Wörter. I'm waiting for 2 words. Salachti Kidvarecha. And if you're going to say, he said, that you don't have any tzaddikim, because you don't have any tzaddikim, he says, and in Rimanov there's a tzaddik Lemendele, he says, who's Shaveh L'chol HaTzaddikim. And if you're going to say that we have a generation that there's no Urim V'Tumim, in Lublin there's Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak, the Lubliner, and he's Shaveh Urim V'Tumim. He's like the Urim V'Tumim. And if you're going to say that there's no one that's doing tshuva, you don't have to, is me an old man. Ich bin gereit tshuva zetan. That's what he said. Ich bin gereit tshuva zetan. For ganz Klal Yisrael. Better that. I'm begging of you. Zuk shem salachti kidvara. This was going on in his shul. And suddenly he was silent. He was silent, and he was in a long dvekus. And in the middle, with a thundering voice, he cried out, Vayomer Hashem, and he yelled out, Salachti kidvara. And the Ruzhiner said, the Heilige Ruzhiner said, I believe in absolute faith that had the Kozhnitzer Magid not heard clearly coming out from the Ebershter's mouth himself, Salachti Kidvarecha, he would not have gone any weiter. When he said, Vayomer Hashem Salachti Kidvarecha, he heard God say, Vayomer Hashem Salachti Kidvarecha. This was 4 days before the Kozhnitzer Magid passed away. That Erev Sukkot he passed away. The Lubliner didn't know, because the news didn't arrive to Lublin. The Lubliner did not know, or they didn't tell him that the Chayzer passed away. That the Kozhnitzer passed away. And when it came Simchas Torah, famous story, they found the Lubliner outside on the floor outside of his house. He lived in a second story. They found him outside. His bones were broken. He was in terrible pain. They had no idea what happened. And basically, some dark forces or whatever it is, picked him up and threw him out the window. He was to brach on his bones. They took him out. And he said himself, that's how he knew the Kozhnitzer passed away, because he said, "Anisht for my mama." He said, my mother that was holding me on one side, and the Kozhnitzer Magid that was holding me on the other side, then I would have been kaput. He said, but why didn't they tell me that he's not here anymore? In other words, he says, I would have stopped. No, he said I would have stopped because they were pushing certain buttons up there. And had I known that I don't have the support anymore of the Kozhnitzer Magid, I would have let go. Because he didn't know. So that's year Taka, he passed away. That was one of the most devastating years in the Chassidish, in the Olam HaChassidi, because you had the three giants, literally all three leaders, all passed away in the same year. So Polish Chassidus was devastated, but obviously they had students that were huge tzaddikim. Reb David of Lulav, Reb Inum of Pshischa, the Yid HaKadosh, Reb Shalom of Belz, who else?
What do you mean? Who's still about the window?
Who?
I heard this story.
Masked Sitrachaniks.
Not even human beings.
He was thrown out by some whoever didn't like what he was shaking up. Some satanic.
So they may not put the what year was it?
They were pushing the Geula. That's what happened. When it says you're not supposed to be Deichek HaKetz, they were doing it at that moment. They felt that it's not that Yidden can't. They felt that Yidden can't anymore hold it, and they were pretty serious muscle men. They were Moishe Nefesh for it, and all three passed away.
You think that's the reason why?
It's clear that Rebbe brings it. Nachtem is given, the Rebbe brings, and Nachtem is given the Kiyadua, the Ma'asim, the Chayyim, the Mudli, and the Rebbe is explaining why now it's not a problem anymore. Because now it's already called a kids, and it goes the whole thing. But the Rebbe mentions Kiyadua, Sipur, Ma'achoyze, from Mudli.
What are we doing?
And
What do you think we're doing here?
You need.
so,
Come on the license. Come on the license. Out the window. You can't just come on the license.
The tea party's over?
Magid.
Yeah. It's the one. When you landed on the tower,
Really, come closer. God, you want to say come closer? Right. No, don't. No. No. Yeah. What?
talking about the bells of Tomahawk.
Bells, that one? Bells, yeah. Oh. Good song.
Not easy for the car phone.
Check it out. All right.
gonna do a Zimun?
I don't want.
You make one. You don't even want. You're a funny guy.
You don't. Tony.
Make the Zimun? What? Shut and dancing as the We say Beetle together. Rabbi. See, the Abish even sent us one yid with a shrine on face. You say maybe it's the Kozhnitzer Magid, eh?
Wow, I've never seen it before in my life.
You know, God's what I have Mashiach with
Yeah.
Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who was good friends with Rabbi Yisrael Kozhnitzer, with sort of Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He saw Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev as part of, as kind of a Rebbe of his, but he didn't want to refer to him as Rebbe because he said that Rabbi Levi, he said, or it was known, that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev had Nishmas Rabbi Akiva, and since the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva didn't live long, so he didn't want to refer to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev his Rebbe. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev actually had to escape the Redifus HaMasnagdim, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev ran to Kozhnitzer. And he hung out with the Kozhnitzer for about a year, or half a year. There's a few stories about the two of them during that time. One of them is Shavuos by night. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, after Thick and Leil Shavuos, said to the Kozhnitzer, let's go to the mikveh. And the two of them, and the Kozhnitzer said, yes, but you know what, I don't like splashing. You know, I like it calm. You know, I need my motion with me. Kozhnitzer was very different than Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, even though Kozhnitzer was a ish nilhav ma'oid, as we said, he was the Rabbi Melech said he's giving him his heart. But yet, it was different than the Islamists of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. So he told Rabbi Levi Yitzchak to contain himself. And he agreed. So they went, and they were going over there, and there was a hill. And then at the bottom of the hill was the entrance of the mikveh. Maybe the same place like Rameda to Mishlan had a hill. But that was there, the mikveh law. It was at the bottom of the hill was the mikveh. So they came, and when they got to the top of the hill, and it was like a lois hashaf, and imagine the situation. Shavuos in the morning, but Levi Yitzchak is really up all night saying Mikkel Shavuos, and he's going to receive the Torah the next morning. And at this moment, he suddenly gives a geschrei, and he yells, and he says, "The gate, feed in the column, chupparayin," and he goes, shoo, and he goes rolling down the hill, rolls right down to the mikveh. Lama feed in the column, that's what it is. Lama feed in the column, chupparayin.
What was that?
And he said it, because the whole Shavuos is the marriage. The kala, let's escort the kala to the chuppah. And but he was so excited that he got in. He was doing somersaults.
Usually escort the chatan to the chuppah.
And he made it down all the way. Kala is the Jewish people are the kala. During that year together, they also Seder, the story how they had the Seder. Also, the Kozhnitzer didn't let Rebbe Yitzchak do the Seder with him because he said, I have nice dishes, I have nice things, I don't want you to throw things around over here. So they would do the Seder in 2 different rooms. And one of the great Tzadikim of Poland, I forgot it, maybe Magid, I'm not sure exactly who he was said that that Pesach, he sat and he was reading the Agada, and he was between the 2 rooms, and he was looking over here, and he said, a tainug, like the tainug, what was his lashon of it? He said, a tainug like this, that I had that Seder watching both these Tzadikim doing the Seder. That's like impossible. Halavai, like a maiden should be anything close to this experience. By the way, the Kozhnitzer Magid once said that the Ebershter knows that the only time that I have is the time of davening, because his son in a sefer, his son is Moshe took over after him as a sefer. The son, he writes that the Tzadikim will come mamish to close on nefesh during davening. He says, "Can you do it like with my father, who basically fainted many times? Had fainted, like he completely. They needed to revive him. He just wasn't." He said that the Ebershter knows what kind that my only tainug I have is in davening. So therefore, he allows me to daven because why? Because Meshalem, it says the Ebershter pays off the non-Tzadikim the reward in this world. Because the Ebershter pays for the wicked their reward in this world. So what's the Ebershter going to give me? He's going to give me sushi to pay me up in this world. So what does he give me? He allows me to daven. And I have such a time, he knows there's nothing else he can give me, so he lets me that to happen. The Barditchever and the Kozhnitzer Magid were okay, I mentioned it was good friends. What was I going to say? Another story about that. Story about the Alter Rebbe. I mentioned the Alter Rebbe sends a letter to the Alter Rebbe defending himself. When there was the end of the Alter Rebbe's life, the Alter Rebbe had a huge snagus from Rabbi of Mezhebush, Rabbi of Kalis, accused the Alter Rebbe as mishandling the monies that he was sending to Eretz Yisrael. And they chose a different gabbai in tzedakah. They started a new fund. And the Alter Rebbe was very, very upset about that. He was the main fund to send all the money to Eretz Yisrael. It chose Mordechai of Nashchis became the second guy, whatever. It became 2 koilos. It's koil Chabad, and there was koil Volin, whatever.
That's
whatever. And the Alter Rebbe, and including in that, started a big machlokes against him. The Alter Rebbe had more pain from this machlokes than from the machlokes that he had from the Misnag. It caused him a tremendous aggravation. The Alter Rebbe sends a letter to the Apter of the Rameshu Hashlav Apt with that I heard
that said he was a big guy, right?
Yeah.
He said he was a Gilgal from a claim that mistreated mice. What? Yeah.
Apter of was physically very good.
He said
He used to say in Yom Kippur, he used to say,
Yeah, Kamanakai. Okay, yeah.
He also says he had a big red line on his back.
Yeah.
And he says he was the 10th chief by Yaakov that Yaakov gave Meiser. Yeah, right?
Oh, Yitzchak Moshe. I believe Yitzchak Moshe. Yitzchak Moshe was also a student.
No, he said he used to know them in good.
But he remembers that Yaakov Avinu sang with the sheep. But in any case, the story I'm going back to is that the Alter Rebbe writes. I saw the Magid. It's ridiculous of the Alter Rebbe. The Kahas printed. So he writes to the Alter Rebbe and he says that thank you for sending me this letter, because he sends him a letter saying that I heard about you lashon hara or whatever, and that the Alter Rebbe says, how can the chas v'shalom, there shouldn't be a pit between me and you. He says and I'm so happy you sent me the letter because you're not keeping it in your heart, because if that, it would have been chas v'shalom terrible. And he says, thank you for this, but you should know. And he says, if you want to know my righteousness, you speak to my Mechutman of Levi Yitzchak and speak to the Kozhnitzer Magid. So he uses. They weren't not first generation, second generation. In other words, their anecdotes were married. There's the famous Shalom ben Chasana. The Shalom ben Chasana, when Alter Rebbe said, this was the Mittler Rebbe's daughter married one of the Levi Yitzchak, grandson of Levi Yitzchak. So by that, the Alter Rebbe referred to the Levi Yitzchak as the Machut. And the Yishai is there. The Kozhnitzer Magid is my Eidos. Him and together with the what was I saying? The story that I wanted to say.
Him and the Machutim.
So it seems like the Alter Rebbe Shtak Alter. One of the big boys. And Shmelk of Nikolsburg, when he was in his yeshiva, I said in the beginning that he learned by the Shmelk's yeshiva. That's his beginning of exposure to the Siddish before he came to the Magid. Oh, here's a story. Okay, here's a story. Once during Pesach, by the Seder, he sent his Einikel, Rabbi Yechiel Meir of Mandalitzia, who was a little boy and he was raised by the Kozhnitzer Magid. Kozhnitzer Magid had him on his lap the whole Seder. And when it came time for Shvei Hamascha, the boy went to open the door. And when he opened the door, the little Yingler gave a scream, "Oh! Don't let Eliyahu Hanavi!" Kozhnitzer went and put his hand in his mouth. The silence. Shvei Hamascha and everything. And everybody was like astounded.
There was nobody there.
Not that anybody saw.
Right.
Then the Kozhnitzer asked, "Did you hear what the boy said?" They said, "Yeah." He said, "Aben, it's nicht gewinn Eliyahu. It's the gewinn der Rebbe. The Mezritcher Magid." So he said, this was the Mezritcher Magid. And he said, "Das was wissen, the Gilui von Rebbe is hecher after from Gilui Eliyahu." He says, not because the Rebbe is necessarily bigger than Eliyahu, but still to be able to see the Rebbe is a bigger thing than to be able to see him. This is one version of the story. There's another version of the story which I read somewhere else, which it wasn't on Pesach. It was one night that he slept in the room with his grandfather. And at 3 o'clock in the morning or so, he sees someone came to visit his grandfather. And the way they were talking, the way he was referring to him, to the Kozhnitzer Magid, was in a very, not like everybody else referred to him. The Rebbe or something like this. He was speaking on a first name basis. And then when the Sid left, he asked his Zayda if that was Eliyahu Hanavi or something. So he told him, "Name das is given the Rebbe." But he came to him. He writes that he had a chazon.
I thought he was a Talmud of Elimelech.
He was first he was by the Mezritcher Magid for a short period of time. According to their estimate, what they write, only 12 weeks was the entire time that he was there. They never got to see him again. But that's his period that was there. But then after that, he was a Talmud of the Melech. And then, just like the Alter Rebbe, after the Magid was a Talmud of the Mendel of Vitebsky. Two senior Talmidim of the Magid became Rebbes. Him in Russia and him in Poland. The Melech in Poland, and the Mendel of Haradoker. The Mendel of Vitebsky. Then when he went there to Yisrael, that's when the Alter Rebbe became Rebbe. That's when he appointed him. He told him, "You're in charge of the Chassidim in Russia." But when Mendel of Vitebsky,
why did Mendel go to Yisrael?
They all wanted to go. They wanted to go din der Eibishter. Him and Avram Kalis, and the Alter Rebbe also was going to go with them. The Alter Rebbe joined them. And they were already almost by the port. And Mendel of Vitebsky told them that he has to turn around. And you can't leave and forsake. Well, I'm going to treat my soul to a spa. But you got to take care of the Chassidim.
They wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael.
They wanted to go to serve the Eibishter, to the Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. And the Alter Rebbe wanted to go with them.
But they
forced the Alter Rebbe back. Alter Rebbe Shem was in doubt. The Magid came to the Alter Rebbe and begged. The Alter Rebbe had visions of the Magid coming to him, begging him, "Don't go, stay in Russia." And finally, the Alter Rebbe relented, and he gave in, and he didn't go. The Alter Rebbe was like he can't join his friends, and he felt robbed of everything. He felt like what? Is it kind of? Is it? It was like it wasn't like a Rebbe like the Magid, but it was who he was Makabel Maris from at that point. Then when he left, he became Rebbe in Russia.
Russia was brutal.
It was brutal because
they were also very.
It was very. Russia was very hard because Russia, you had them assigned lit to that whole area. They were. the Alter Rebbe had the brunt of it because he had to deal with it. That's why the only one you can leave over there was someone like the Alter Rebbe, a guy like him. But as mentioned earlier, the Kozhnitzer was a huge guy. It's like 20, 30 svarim from him on Shas, quite a lot. But I don't know how much of it has survived, but they have written all the svarim and different sections on Kabbalah, Mamish Kabbalah, on Arizim Malach, on Zoya, on different svarim, Sefer Aborif. And then there is a Chassidus. He left a lot of writing. And he also gave Askamas. And he gave each one of the Askamas on the Renachmans. And the Melakutim Aravins Askama from the Kozhnitzer Magid. And he also...
Who is the Rachman talking from? Directly the Baal Shem Tov?
No, he's not. He didn't do this. Kind of, it looks like paved his own. First of all, his uncles. He had the Baruch Mezhebush and he had the Degel Machne Ephraim.
Wasn't his grandfather?
So Degel Machne Ephraim.
His grandfather, his great grandfather was the Baal Shem Tov. But
The Degel Machne Ephraim is his uncle,
Degel Machne Ephraim was his uncle,
who's the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov.
who was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Yeah. So
And Reb Nachman was a nephew to Degel Machne Ephraim.
with a nephew.
So
Reb
the sister-
Nachman,
His sister-
Fega, Reb Nachman's mother, is the daughter of Adel. And Adel, the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, is the Baal Shem Tov, this Adel. Adel had a daughter, Fega. And this Fega
and Reb Nachman.
is Reb Nachman's mother. And so Adel's brother is Baruch of Mezhebush. Baruch of Mezhebush is
Vega's brother.
Fega's brother, and also the Degel Machne.
What's the Degel Machne?
Rabbi Ephraim of Slavnikov or something. So he was, and they were. I don't know exactly who his.
The Baal Shem Tov didn't have sons, right?
I don't even know that Nachman saw the Baal Shem. I think he saw him when he was very young.
From Nachman?
Yeah.
I've laughed. There's a story.
Yeah, I think
if
it could be. I'm not sure. I have to find out.
you would have.
If you know, when was Nachman born? If I'm not,
So he's after 1810 at 36 years old. So
How could he be born?
1810 at 36. So you go back.
1776.
No, then he was born. Then he was born after the Baal Shem Tov.
1776.
So the Baal Shem Tov passed away in Tov Kuf Chaf.
no,
The Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1760.
Yeah, 14 years before.
So,
maybe not. Maybe it was.
and maybe it was maybe a little earlier. I'm not sure.
Nachman was young.
When is your Nachman born?
No, it's like,
It's down to 6.
yes, after Baal Shem Tov or something.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah. Oh, so the Kozhnitzer Magid writes that he saw the Baal Shem Tov in Chizayim in Cholam, and he asked the Baal Shem Tov the reason why when he was young. He writes it in a sefer. The reason why when he was young, he felt that every day he was reaching, when he came to Chassidus and stuff, he was reaching incredible madrigas, higher and higher and higher. And recently he says, it's like, he doesn't have those leaps. He's not feeling that at all. He asked the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov said that when a kid goes to Cheder, so every day he comes back. The first day he learned this, second day he learned Chumash, the third day he's already learned 2 psukim, and that. But once you're already in yeshiva, season learning your money, you don't have those leaps because it's a whole on a moist begadlos. It's much harder to move in different. Like when you're in small madrigas in the beginning, you double things quickly.
Double. Since you have $1 billion, you can't double it. If you have $1, it's easy to double it every dollar.
Okay, we're gonna stop the stream.